shall be redeemed. He shall be redeemed. And the Lord shall be redeemed. Shall sing together, and all flesh shall sing together. Lord and all flesh shall sing together. All flesh shall sing together. Shall sing together, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. Glory of the Lord, shall see it together. In the glory of the Lord shall be revealed. He shall be revealed. All shall sing together. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken.
Welcome to Patriot, Lament. Some stuff straightened out here. Welcome to Patriot, Lament on 660 KFA. Or remember, you can get us on 97.5 also.
Neurologist, and I see a lot of.
Turn that guy off. Which obviously, when we play rock and roll, it sounds a lot better on 97.5 than it does on AM. In studio, we got Mr. Mike Anderson. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
And online, David. You there, Dave? All right.
I'm here.
Cool. And we're going on, maybe you can jump on YouTube at Patriots Lament, search Patriots Lament, or what's the other one? Radio Free Fairbanks. You can watch us live and join in the live chat if you wish. We want to start her off with sad news. Or good, well, yeah, sad news. Sad news for us. Our friend of the show, friend of mine, friend of all of ours, Mr. Frank Turney passed away this last week. Tried to look on, I don't know what he died from, so probably a heart attack or something, because I know he was in fairly good shape for his age or whatever. My wife and daughters had seen him the day before walking down the street looking chipper, so one of those things. But anyways, Frank was a long time participant of the show for sure. Joined us several times here in studio and called in a lot. Was a court system, quote unquote, justice system reform man. Fought for justice and mercy in the court system most of his life, sounds like, and he was jailed for such things, for trying to inform juries of their the power that they have in courtrooms, and was the head of the Fully Informed Jury Association for the Alaska chapter, and is going to be missed. So we've got, at least what I can think of, two of our two full participants of the show over the last 8 years, Winston and now Frank, are gone on to, well, I happen to believe better things than what they had here. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and if you knew Frank Turney, if you'd like to have a little, just call in and say something about him, or if you know, I can't find out on the News Miner how he passed away because I'm not a paying subscriber, nor shall I be for any reason ever. Or the News Minus, as Dave Giesel coined some 8 odd years ago over the airwaves, the News Minus. So if you'd like to talk about Frank or give a little, I know he had family, at least a son he'd seen recently. He'd like to talk about his son. Sounded like they had a good relationship, at least in the last few years. And he had some grandkids. But just champion. He was a champion for the people that we need to be champions for, people that are imprisoned, people that are railroaded by the state, people that are thrown in prison for ridiculousness. He was a champion of legalization. Well, not for legal. I don't like the word legalization. To unlawfully throw people in prison for doing things that they want to do, such as smoking or using cannabis products. I remember he hated the word marijuana because he said that was a word that the state used, was a racist term the state used for Mexicans, I think. Hispanics, I believe it was Hispanics, right? Mm-hmm. So he would always, whenever you use that word, when he was on the phone or in studio, he would correct you immediately. Don't use that term. It's cannabis. Frank told us here about a month ago, after 40 years of smoking, he'd actually had quit finally. Mm-hmm. And you can tell even in his to do it and had done it. But, leave it to politicians. You got someone that's using their free will to do something good for the community. You can't have that. So we got to go in there and stop that crowd and pay some loser to do it instead of some fine man like Frank Turney. Mm-hmm. Frank Turney wasn't liked by everyone. He especially, I don't think, was liked by anyone at the Borough Assembly. I don't think he was liked by anyone at the City Council, except for maybe a few council members. He never quite came over all the way to our position on voting, which is fine, because he talked about a lot. I know it's kind of a struggle. He's like, I don't know about, it's fine. We don't hold that against anyone, really, especially not Frank. Frank was a guy that ran for office every year that I've lived here that I can remember when he wasn't in jail for freedom fighting. Ran for borough assembly just about every year, ran for mayor. Unfortunately, he never won. He didn't win this year. I think he was running for city mayor, Fairbanks city mayor,
Yes.
and he did not win. And he should have. Frank should have. Unfortunately, there's too many commies in this town that kept him from being a mayor. I never voted for him myself because I don't vote, but always supported anything that Frank got behind. Frank was a good man. Frank was a guy that was very passionate about what he believed, had convictions, not just beliefs that changed in the wind here and there. He was willing, as we said, willing to go to jail over his convictions. Wasn't afraid to get in front of supposed authority, such as a judge or a cop or anything like that, and speak his mind to him, which is exactly how it ought to be. They, cops, judges, politicians are not lords over us. And Frank made sure that they knew that he knew that. Didn't put up with any crap from no politician. One thing I loved about Frank is that he would gladly call up on the radio show and call out any politician that he felt like at any time, and felt free to say anything he wanted to about them. And at the same time, always stayed within the FCC guidelines for language on air. Even though at times I'm sure he wanted to get a little more rowdy. But I loved Frank. He was a good man. Loved his beard. I loved the Ron Paul. When Ron Paul came up here in 2011, he wore his jail suit. Mm-hmm. He'd wear that jail suit all over the place, the black and white striped suit, and would embarrass people.
He'd protest the NDAA any chance he got.
Oh, yes. Loved to protest National Defense Authorization Act 1021, 1022. He was, well, besides us, one of the first people here in town, anyways, that were on that. Mm-hmm. And he was very vocal about that and very educational. Frank had tons of educational materials. I'm the alternate contact for Fully Informed Jury Association, and they would send him truckloads of stuff and he would pass on to me, and I didn't do as good as he did at passing stuff out, but he had posters and little pamphlets, and that's actually, he got thrown in jail the one time that I know of for passing out fully informed jury pamphlets in front of a courthouse. They called that jury tampering. So telling the truth to the jurors about the power that they have in the court was jury tampering. Mm-hmm. As the great Ron Paul would say, telling the truth in an empire of lies is dangerous. But good old Frank, he didn't give a crap. He told them anyways. So if you'd like to call and talk about Frank, maybe you got some memories of him, maybe if you knew him personally or whatever, call him and talk to him. Talk to us about him if you feel like, or if you know a little more information about his passing. Like I said, I don't think any of us. Rob, do you know? What do you know? Okay. All right. So 907-458-8255. We do have some callers. We're talking about the great late Frank Turney. And you know what? If there should be a statue, which I'm not into real statues all that much, but I wouldn't mind at all to have a statue of Frank Turney stand up in front of the courthouse, holding up the Bill of Rights. Oh, I will mention that before we get to the phones. Frank was always a advocate of the Bill of Rights and got them read at the city council just about every year. Got them read at the borough assembly, not quite as much because they really are communists there. The North Pole City Council, they were read there several times by Boy Scout troops that Frank was involved with. Frank was a very big advocate of the Bill of Rights, specifically 4, 5, and 6. The amendment, Second Amendment. I don't think he could own a gun, which is fine, but he was an advocate for free speech and all those things. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I do remember Peace Separate collapsed lung at one point, and I'm not 100% certain that's what caused it, but
I believe that's what facilitated his stopping of smoking.
Yeah.
David, you want to say anything before, or Rob? You want to say anything before we jump on the phones here?
Another thing that Frank advocated for was the restoration of rights for felons when they had exited the prison system.
Yeah. Yep.
Because, how could you strip an American of, if you're going to pretend that we're operating under the Constitution, how can you strip their rights after they've served their time?
Exactly. Right. Yep. When they've so-called paid their debt to society, which is a joke. All it really means is that they paid their fines to the state. Especially felons, but I believe there are some misdemeanors now. As David said, a lot of your rights are stripped from you after you get out of prison, and Frank was very instrumental in fighting that. Yeah, glad you brought that up. That was a good point. Frank was just a good guy. Frank was the guy that in scriptures, when Christ told us to work to fight for justice and mercy, and to visit those in prison, that was Frank Turney. Frank Turney did it in deed, not just in words. So let's hit the phones. And I do believe that Frank Turney is with Christ right now, actually. I believe that he probably got to stand up there and heard the good old words of, "Welcome, my good and faithful servant," which is words that we all should look forward to hear. Let's go to the phones. Hello, caller. Thanks for holding.
Hi, this is Randy.
Hi, Randy. How you doing?
Yeah, I was pretty shocked when I heard that. I went to the city council meeting this last Monday, and the first thing I noticed is I didn't see Frank Turney sitting there, or Victor Brubridge, who's a good friend of him, sitting there. So that was odd. And anyway, a little later, Victor came in, and also I testified about something or other. And I remember the mayor said to Victor, when he testified, he said, "Well, I know you've had a rough day," or something like that. And I was wondering what he meant by that. And a little later, I heard the news, and I was just shocked, because I had just seen Frank Turney a few days before, Friday, at the Mary Saya pool. I was coming out of the sauna, and he and Victor were both in the hot tub there, and Frank wanted to talk to me, and in fact invited me in. I said, "Well, I'm kind of hot. I just came out of the sauna," but I knelt down and talked a little bit with him. He wanted to talk a little bit about Schaefer Cox, and I talked with him about it. And then a little later, I saw him in the locker room a little bit, talked just a little bit with him there. And he looked good to me there, so I was quite shocked. And I've always admired Frank Turney. Now, I was on his bad side for a little while there, as you may remember. He had some harsh words for me every now and then.
Yep.
But that's okay. But and I felt a little hostile to him too because of that. But throughout, I always admired Frank Turney for standing up, for the Bill of Rights, and I particularly appreciate his strong efforts to support Schaefer Cox and give him a little bit of mercy there. And the reason I kind of got on his bad side because some years ago, I was talking on Problem Corner, and the subject of Mr. Millett, I forgot his first name now, the guy that used to be in charge of the Alaska Republican Party.
Oh, yeah.
And I said,
yep.
Yeah, and I guess Frank liked that guy a lot, and he's a good guy, by the way, the Millett guy. But I said something about that he didn't do as good a job or something for the Republican Party. I guess he didn't fundraise or whatever it was. Anyway, Frank called in and leapt to his defense, which is a good characteristic, standing up for people that you like and everything. And he was a little down on me for that. But in the last some months this year, Frank was being friendly to me and good to me. And I appreciate that. And because he could kind of see we were on the same page about a lot of stuff. And so I'm going to miss him. And he's a unique guy, and I can't think of anyone else quite like him. You know, he never afraid to speak out how he felt, and so I appreciate his honesty. So, anyway, one other thing I did see on his Facebook page, some people have posted their condolences, but also his son Nathan has been posting that there's a GoFundMe account for an observance or some things, and I haven't yet contributed. I was thinking about maybe putting a little bit into that, but so there's that on his Facebook page.
I didn't think about that, so that would probably have the information we would need to, because I was wondering if they're going to have a funeral observance or something like that for him. I don't know if they're going to bury him here or send him back where his son is.
Yeah, I know at the city council meeting, they were talking, Jerry Cleworth mentioned, he said, boy, I know the cemetery, Clay Street Cemetery is filled up, but it would be nice if we could work something out, as far as, him being there, and I think the mayor said something, he was thinking the same thing. So, but who knows, maybe, I don't know, I don't know, but he's sorry to see him be gone.
Yep.
I think he is in a better place. I think he is a saved man, yeah.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Appreciate the call. Thanks. Yeah, one thing good about Frank is he was always good with a laugh at himself. And I can't recall very many times that he hung up from this show that we weren't laughing ourselves quite wholeheartedly. Sometimes to tears.
Yeah.
All right, caller, we have one. Go ahead, you're on the air. But if you want to join us, it's 907-458-8255. We're discussing our late friend who just passed away this last week, Frank Turney.
Hello?
Yep, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Oh, very, very good. I wanted to certainly express the sentiment that I considered Frank Turney one of my heroes. When I first came to town in 1983, there were two, it may have been shortly after I arrived there, but anyway, there were two scandals that he made me aware of, because he was a caller to Bill Wally's Problem Corner, and later on to Steve Agbaba's talk show. And the one scandal at the police department was to do with the evidence room, and the other one had to do with Gail Frank, who was the superintendent of FCC. And of course, in the latter case, the troopers were supposed to investigate that, I think. And basically, this woman, who was a criminal herself, was allowed to escape so that she could collect her pension. And I found that incredibly wrong. And I ended up being in class at the university with her daughter, and every time I saw that kid's face, I thought, boy, what a swine your mother is. I could tell you a little story about Frank that has to do with Steve Agbaba's show, and this may trigger a recollection in the memory of a lot of your audience, and that is that one evening when the show was on, Frank Turney called in and mentioned that there were a couple of cops, or at least one, maybe several, that were chasing after him, and he had done nothing worse than walk across a parking lot. But evidently they were trying to get even with him on this fully informed jury thing, or some kind of a deal like that, or because he had said something disparaging about the police department. So that may trigger a recollection in the mind of some of your listeners who've been around here for a long time. Anyway, thank you for honoring Frank's performance with the Fully Informed Jury Association and being concerned about keeping the Bill of Rights in effect, if you will. Thank you, and I'll be listening to see what other people remember.
Great. Thanks for calling in. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
If you're just tuning in, this is Patriot Lament on 660 KFAR. You can also join us on 97.5 on the FM dial. We're discussing one of our good friends, Frank Turney, who passed away this last Monday. Had a lot of friends in town. Oh, Frank, what a guy. I remember, there's too many stories, but what a guy. I know a lot of people were in disagreement with him, but I think that his attitude towards them, and I was just reading, I guess even if you're not a subscriber on the News Miner, you can read the comment section, and there's quite a few people in here that I didn't agree with anything with Frank, but he sure was a good guy, and I think that's how Frank came off. He could get riled up. I did see his face get red a few times, and he was, but it was never out of hate for anything. It was always out of compassion. And I remember we had a show years ago called Do You Hate the State? And he thought that was kind of weird. And then later we had another show, Do You Hate the State? And he called in and he said, and by golly, I hate the state. So we gave him a round of applause there. A round of applause. Yeah, he was a supporter of the show from, I believe, the very beginning, because he kind of followed KFAR. I think he called Problem Corner from day one, or not day one, but as long as I can remember, he was on Problem Corner. And I always thought it was fun when he'd call out the guests too that would come on the shows. Or I don't listen to. I don't know if it's called Problem Corner now. They kind of switched things up, but I've heard that he's called in whatever the daily local show is now and give him a good blast. And you guys probably remember when we had the new chief of police here a few years ago, 4 years ago or so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Frank had some very kind words for him. He God blessed him several times. He was not a fan of that guy at all. And I wouldn't doubt that he was instrumental in that person getting, he was here for a year and had to move on. And Frank was very joyous about that occasion. I suppose the powers that be, or the powers that think they be, the court system here and the local police department are probably not too sad to have him go on their way. And in my mind, if the right people are not sad that you're gone, you did a good job while you were here. You did a good job while you were here. Good people mourn when good people pass away. Anyway, so we just open. We don't normally have phone open for the first hour, but if you'd like to call in 907-458-8255 to give your condolences or talk something, well, you don't even have to say something nice about Frank if you don't want to. We'll gladly defend him for him in his absence. There was something else that he was. Randy mentioned that he was a very vocal, not just vocal, but he was pretty. He advocated to get Schaefer Cox out. I think he was.
He was probably the most vocal proponent for that.
Yeah. And didn't just mouth off about it. I think he followed it pretty closely, knew quite a bit about the case, knew more than I did about where he was, or anyone that I know is what I mean, about where he was being held, when he was being transferred to what prison. Knew the conditions of just about every prison in the United States, it seemed like, what their records were as far as
Well, I remember
treatment.
Yeah, I remember the first call he made about it was right after it happened, and his comment was the most effective Fed in that whole case was Schaefer himself, and so he wasn't afraid to criticize him for that. But as details of the case came out, he began to see how dishonest the case was, and he knew a lot of the internals of the case that the general public just doesn't know at all.
Yeah.
So,
also an advocate for legalization of hemp farming, which I've never understood why. I mean, I understand why, but it boggles my mind why that has been such an issue with the U.S. government to not allow, because it was a pretty big part of the early days of America, the colonial times.
Yeah, he wasn't just an advocate for legalization of cannabis,
right? So you
could enjoy it. He was a huge advocate for the legalization of hemp farming because it's such a useful plant for making products. So it wasn't just about let's legalize the THC. It was about let's legalize industries.
Right. Yep.
And
that's what I remember.
Yeah, and
that's what I remember him for first.
Right.
And when I was first exposed to Frank, it was the hemp thing.
Yeah, and he understood the great advantages it would have for the economy here as well.
Yeah, I think that he figured. I don't remember if this is right. In some places, they can get up to 6 crops a year. So he was figuring like 3 or 4 crops a year in Alaska they could get.
Yeah.
And, you have the state was funding, barley farms and all these things that were just ridiculous, trying to grow these, I don't know if some of them are successful or not, but he was, when you have government always crying about economy, how do we can, well, he had a solution for some economy farmers. And of course that solution was always shot down.
And he talked about it for wood pellets, for the oil, for the protein, for he knew the whole rap on it, and he got a bunch of the numbers on it too.
Yeah, he called in here. He talked about hemp plastics and hemp concrete and hemp paper and hemp everything.
Henry Ford's hemp car.
Right. Yeah, he called about that.
I'll put a YouTube link up to that right now.
Yeah, that was, and he advocated the benefits of CBD oil way before that became any kind of a mainstream thing, which has been proven that it helps people. A guy that works for me, his wife, they're in their 60s or whatever, and his wife has, I don't know exactly what disease, but her hands always shake and lots of aches or whatever. And she couldn't sleep through the night, and most of it was because of the uncontrollable shaking. And she started taking, I guess she said that wasn't anything she got locally, but it was something she got online that was mailed to her, and she started that, and he said within the first week the shakes were gone. And whatever she had, I believe it was a back pain, a chronic back pain, and it was gone. She was sleeping all night. She said she was getting up and around, walking around, doing better than he was, and before she was taking that CBD oil, it was the other way around. She couldn't do hardly anything. Couldn't stand up for any length of time. She just could not control her hands. And again, we get told that it's a big scary thing. Oh yeah, people in CBD oil, they want to get high and think that it's some kind of medical thing. The CBD oil has nothing to do with getting high. It doesn't have any THC in it. It's a natural pharmaceutical, which is probably why government doesn't want it. I mean,
Yeah, my mom had she was in a car wreck years ago, and she has problems with her thumb because her hand was on the steering wheel when it happened. Guy pulled it. They were on the freeway, and guy pulled a camper trailer out into the freeway in one of those turnaround zones. And then the wreck happened. But anyway, so she goes into the doctor and regularly for that. And one time she went in, and the nurse brought the salve out and said, "Here, try this." And she didn't know what it was. I said if it works good for you, you can buy some more here. Put it on. Worked great. Got home, and my sister looks at it, says, "You know what this is, Mom? It's just cannabis oil." So yeah, it works. It works good for that stuff.
I know they use it in everything. I think isn't it? I believe it's legal in Canada, right? Growing hemp, David. Hemp farms.
Yeah, federally legal as of more than a year ago.
Yeah. Now, if there's nothing wrong with you, I mean, you might get some placebo effect off of it or something. Make you feel better because you think it's going to. But yeah, it does work for real ailments.
Yeah.
My favorite thing that Frank used to say all the time was he had a hemp shirt or whatever, and when he was talking about hemp, he's like, I could roll up this whole shirt and smoke it. I wouldn't get a buzz out of it.
I remember, yeah. I could smoke this whole thing and wouldn't get it. Oh, man. Yeah. He's going to be a hard one to replace for sure. For sure. And, it's too bad a lot of people, marijuana's been so taboo for so long, so that kind of made him the kind of an outlier. Oh, yeah, that's Crazy Frank. I remember the first time I heard the name of Frank Turney, it was Crazy Frank. Someone, I think... I was a guest on 660 back before we had our own show, and Frank called in, and I was like, Crazy Frank. And I thought, Crazy Frank, who's that? And then I actually met Crazy Frank, and I thought, this is not Crazy Frank, this is Cool Frank. Frank's got it going on. But because of the marijuana issue, a lot of people, turn their nose down on high society or whatever, look down on them. And even more so, I think, though, that people look down on him because of his compassion and passion for people in prison. I think that was his real, he talked a lot. Legalizing marijuana or cannabis was important to him for reasons, and hemp and stuff, but his passion was for people in prison. It really was. And I always looked up to him for that reason more than anything. I mean, the prison reforms or whatever that I don't really remember he would talk much about prison reforms necessarily, but he would just talk about the treatment of people in prison and discuss why people should not be in prison and what it did to people when they got out, and the lives that affected, we talk about too, going to jail for smoking a joint. Well, that does a lot of good if you're a father or whatever, or a mother. Your kids either have no mother or no father. That doesn't seem to quite benefit society the way that the state would want us to believe by any stretch. And I actually learned a lot with him with let's see, who was it? I can't remember. A forgotten founder. He was George Mason. Loved to talk about George Mason because no one ever did. So the forgotten founding father, who was a right noble Virginian man, good man. He and Winston, actually, those two guys talked about Mason quite a lot. And our friend Charles. Yeah. So hopefully we got some younger listeners out there, because all our older friends are getting older. Anyways, no one's calling in about him, so maybe you're just so heart-wrenched you can't put it into words, but we're trying to put it into words for us. So we'll miss Frank. We'll try to, I thought about doing some kind of a montage of some of his calls, because obviously he's recorded. All of our shows are recorded and put up on our YouTube channel, so just about every one of them. I think last week, actually, I remembered last week that he didn't call in, and I remember thinking, it's odd Frank didn't call in, because he always did. So just about any of our past shows you can listen to and hear old good Frank Turney. And the calls usually started with a chuckle and always ended with a hearty laugh. Hardly ever. And I do remember his scuffle with Randy there for a while. They were having a spat. But Frank, I think, if I remember right, Frank actually came on. Yeah, he did. Came on the air and publicly apologized, which was pretty big of him. So it sounds like him and Randy mended the fence there at the end, which, I think because both of them were involved with Schaefer's case and getting that word out. So they were able to find some common ground there. That's good. And that's about all I can think of. So you guys got to take over.
No, I mean, I just remember it being a staple of everything I got involved in, from the Ron Paul stuff. He was always the most enthusiastic at those events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And usually had the best sign and was the most well dressed, I guess you could say.
Definitely.
Yeah. We'd all, everyone else would show up in a suit or a button-down shirt or in slacks. He shows up in his black and white striped jail suit with a big sign that says NDAA.
Yep. He's a big End the Fed guy too.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he was. Yeah, I remember at that Ron Paul event, he sat in the very front row and held that sign up for all to see.
I think I have a bunch of pictures of him at that event.
Well, he was in the paper quite a bit with the event, or with many events. He was usually in the News Minus, and they'd have his picture of him with his. He'd even wear the hat, the little jail hat, and everything. He didn't.
Oh, one thing we haven't noticed: he was a protester against the OCS, also the child kidnappers.
Yep.
He spent a lot of time in front of the courthouse protesting them.
Yes, he did. Yeah, that's good. Glad you remembered that. He was. He didn't like anything that had to do with the state being involved in, well, anybody's lives, but particularly families. I mean, that's why I say it wasn't just stick. He had convictions for it. He was passionate about it. He really believed what he was saying, and he was right. He was right about that.
Yeah, well, he really understood the inhumanity and the destructive nature of the state's so-called justice system.
Right.
So,
yeah. I think he understood in the inhumanity part of it. He understood where there was the human benefit, the societal benefit that we're told is that we're getting when the state throws people in jail, cages them for however many amount of years or time or whatever, and tells us that we're being benefited by them doing that, and telling us that we were accosted or in some way damaged by the person that was put in prison, and then we get to pay for them to live there. Yeah, he understood all those things, and he understood that he hated OCS, rightfully so. Yeah, good old Frank. Yeah, anytime there was something that came up in the community that And 90% of the times I never heard of I didn't know anything about what it was or whatever. Old Frank did. And he was leading the charge. I'm going to be at the Fairbanks City Council on Thursday night. And if you want to hear me, give my... Oh, I bet they just cringed every time Frank walked in. Especially when he was wearing his jail suit. And he'd blast them. Oh, boy, would he blast them. Yeah. Good man. Good man. A lot of times at the end of his call, he'd say, well, I'm going to go smoke a bowl and sign off.
Yeah, a lot of times it was obvious he'd done that before the call, too.
A lot of times it was obvious he was, yeah. We had him in studio a few times for National Jury Day or whatever it was.
September 5th.
September 5th, yeah.
Jury Rights Day.
Yeah, Jury Rights Day. He'd come in and just discuss it with everyone. So always, he never turned us down for an invite, that's for sure. I think he enjoyed it. And it was fun to see him. I remember the first time I saw him when he shaved. I didn't even know who the heck he was. And I think the first time I saw when he was shaved, I saw him in the studio. He came. And I was like, who are you? Oh, that was weird. But man, that sucker could grow back fast because it was a bush.
He was one of the few guys, as I remember, who understood what was going on with the Occupy thing in the Veterans Memorial Park as well.
Yep, he sure did.
Because that whole event split people along left-right lines, so that was a long time ago now, I guess. So the Occupy, there was a Vietnam vet who set up a tent in Veterans Memorial Park as part of the Occupy movement.
Mm-hmm.
And a bunch of the university kids kind of rallied around him. And then the conservatives in town are like, get this guy out of the park. He's desecrating a park for veterans.
Right.
And the guy, he was a veteran. But Frank was one of the few people listening to the show at the time who understood that it was, a protest against a structure that didn't recognize the individual, and he didn't need it to be aligned with the left or the right or whatever for him to get on board.
Yeah. Yeah, he supported him.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going down there actually when they were doing their little sit-in protests or whatever, and seeing Frank was down there.
Talking to him about jury rights.
Jury rights.
He had his pamphlets down there.
That's right. Never let an opportunity slip by, that's for sure.
Yep.
Never did.
It's the right of the jurors to judge the law itself, not just whether or not the law has been violated.
Yep. Not whether the facts are true or not, correct or incorrect. Judge the law itself. Yeah. Yeah, I imagine he probably had an impact on some. Well, we know he did just from some of the folks that we talked there that we had from Occupy. I don't doubt that him being down there and talking to them impacted some of the ways they thought, because a few of the leaders of that had a little different. Their outlook on political life changed a little bit coming out of that. And I wouldn't doubt that Frank had a little bit of he had something to do with that. I remember he loved to hassle Joe Miller too. I did appreciate that. He loved to hassle Joe Miller. Remember when Joe at that same park? There's always some kind of rally going on there, right? Some gun right rally or whatever kind of thing. And whenever they'd invite Joe Miller, Frank would talk before or after. Usually they would try to save Joe for the last because he's like the headline speaker that everyone supposedly came to see, and Frank would go up there and and double down on them.
Well, Joe Miller, and then lately it was Sullivan, Dan Sullivan.
Sullivan.
Yeah,
especially with the Schaefer Cox case, because he'd actually go up and approach Sullivan and ask questions about the Cox case, and it really exposed Sullivan for the guy that he really is.
Yeah,
just so.
Yeah, and I remember he flat blasted Murkowski during the whole NDAA fight. And people don't know, NDAA is just the National Defense Authorization Act. But back in the day when they sections 1021 and 1022 burned in my mind, was the Indefinite Detention Act that they threw in there. And Frank, I remember Lisa Murkowski had some big article in the News Minus about it, and it was just, she made my blood curl reading that thing. And he would let her know about it. That was a good thing about him. Whenever there was a politician in town, he made time to go visit them and let them know how he felt about not only the way they act, but how he felt about them personally. And then would call us on the radio show to give us his personal opinions about their person. He's a great man. He was a great man. Had some faults, as we all do, but who cares? He was a great guy.
He was a person of great conviction, compassion, and humility as well.
Yeah. So you'll be missed, Frank. Yep, you'll be missed. That gives us the end of the show for this hour. We'll be right back with KFAR Patriot Cement.
KFAR 660 AM Fairbanks, K248DK 97.5 FM Fairbanks, the heartbeat of Alaska.
A claim of responsibility. I'm Joe Giro, Fox News. ISIS is claiming responsibility for the London attack that killed 2 people and injured 5. Through its AMAC news service, the group claims the attack was in response to its call for attacks targeting global coalition member states. Authorities have not commented on the claim. The suspect, who was killed by police, had been in prison for 6 years on terrorism offenses.
Police have named this attacker as 28-year-old Usman Khan. He's a known extremist. He served time in prison for planning to bomb the London Stock Exchange. Now, his early release has raised many questions here. Already today, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said it was a mistake to allow violent criminals of his nature out of prison early. Now, meanwhile, police are searching Khan's home as part of their ongoing investigation. They're trying to establish how this convicted terrorist was allowed to strike so easily.
Fox's Kitty Logan in London. Dutch police have arrested a 35-year-old homeless man on suspicion of stabbing 3 teens on a street in The Hague. The man, whose identity has not been released, was taken into custody for questioning about the attack, which happened in an area crowded with Black Friday shoppers. All the victims have been released from a hospital. Powerful storm dumping snow and ice from California to Minnesota. It's now headed east, where millions of holiday travelers will likely be impacted.
As the system tracked eastward, heavy snow from Montana to Wisconsin and winds up to 65 miles an hour in the plains. Parts of South Dakota saw 2 feet of snow, shutting down much of I-90. One person died when their truck slid into a ditch, and a semi also lost control in a second crash over there. National Weather Service has been warning travelers not to drive if they don't have to.
That's Fox's Jackie Heinrich. America is listening to Fox News.
For many years, Fairbanks lacked a shelter for teens needing a safe place. Then in 2014, the door opened as a 24/7 emergency shelter for our youth. The door provides kids aged 12 to 18 a safe place to sleep, home-cooked meals, clothing, supplies, and connections to community resources to help the youth find stability. Since the beginning, volunteers have served alongside paid staff at the door to maintain shelter programs. To find out how you can help, email info@fairbanksyouthadvocates.org. This message brought to you by the radio station.
Is your kid about to enter middle school or high school? Youth and Young Adult Services at the Fairbanks Native Association offers a class for parents called Guiding Good Choices. Guiding Good Choices Workshop is a substance abuse prevention program that provides parents with the knowledge and skills they need to guide their children through adolescence. For more information, call 907-452-6268. 907-452-6268.
This message is brought to you by the Fairbanks Native Association.
Arctic RV is a proud sponsor of Joe Nava's Shooter's Corner, where you get the inside info on the world of guns and shooting from gun expert Joe Nava. Get out and play in Alaska and stay there longer in comfort with help from Arctic RV. See them today for your next Jayco travel trailer or RV parts and service. Alaska plays rough, so rough it in style with Arctic RV. And listen each Thursday at 11 for Joe Nava's Shooter's Corner, right here on KFAR 660 AM.
What do Mick Jagger, Barbara Walters, and Star Jones all have in common? They've all suffered from something called heart valve disease. Heart valve disease affects 11 million Americans, and if left untreated, can lead to death. Unfortunately, less than 1 in 4 Americans have much knowledge of this disease that kills more than 25,000 people every year. The good news is that if heart valve disease is treated, patients can recover and live long, happy, and productive lives. But in order to treat heart valve disease, you need to know if you have it. If you or your loved ones are over the age of 65, have been treated with radiation to the chest, have been diagnosed with a heart murmur, or have a history of heart disease, it's time to listen to your heart. Ask your doctor today about screening for heart valve disease. A message brought to you by Heart Valve Voice US. For more information about the symptoms and treatment for valve disease, go to heartvalvevoice-us.org.
Oh, yeah. Welcome back to Patriot Cement. My name is Joshua Bennett. In the studio, we got Mr. Mike Anderson. Good morning, Mike.
Morning.
Dave Diesel's online with us. And
good morning, Josh.
Have an unidentified friend here. Good friend of Frank's, too. Remember, catch us on the 660 KFAR radio app or TuneIn app, which I think works just fine. Get over at 97.5. Check us out on our YouTube channel, and you can jump on there live and join in on live chat. And we actually sometimes either discuss what you say, what you type in, or we just type back. Either way, we do at least acknowledge that you're there sometimes. So jumping into another topic here, and obviously the number to call in is 907-458-8255. Dave, you had a little subject you wanted to start us out with on this hour. Go ahead.
Yeah. Being as this is a nonpartisan show, I wanted to throw out the name Tulsi Gabbard and see where that goes and what people in Radioland think about her.
I wonder how many people know about her.
That's part of the question too, I suppose.
Right.
Robert Wenzel had a piece on her this last week on Target Liberty, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he noted that, while he never votes, he finds and disagrees with her on a few things. He thinks that she's an interesting candidate. And he was asking his audience, how many of you are considering supporting her in whatever way? She was also on Joe Rogan this last week, and she was on with Jocko Willink, which was an interesting combo.
Really?
Yeah. So Jocko's this, former SEAL team commander guy who was in Iraq, and she was in Iraq as well with the Army. So I didn't listen to the whole interview, but one of the things they brought up was that by the metrics that the parties are supposed to select candidates, she ticks all these boxes, right? She's a younger woman, right? So she's not part of the older ruling elite. She's a woman. She is part indigenous. She's been in the military, like actually in combat. She served in Congress. Like she's actually done all these things. She ticks like all the boxes. And by the media's standards, she doesn't exist.
Right. Mm-hmm. She's the Democrat, Ron Paul.
Well, yeah.
As far as that's concerned.
Ron, I remember there was an article it was on Ron Paul's site. I think it was written by him, but I can't remember now. It's been a while. It was about Tulsi Gabbard, but pointing out that he doesn't agree with her economics. But then again, being that she's anti-war, he doesn't totally disagree with her economics because that foreign policy plays such a huge portion, huge part of domestic economic policy. Really, when you look at it's maybe she supports socialized healthcare or something like that, while conservatives support the war state, and that's an even bigger chunk of the economic pie. So really, she kind of weighs more on our side when you think about it that way.
Yeah.
Because so much money is just wasted on figuring out ways and enacting the murder of people overseas. And she's opposed to that.
Well, you brought up last week, Mike, how foreign policy dictates domestic policy.
Yes.
As foreign policy goes, so does domestic policy. Mm-hmm. And, like you said, Dave Wenzel says, I don't agree with her on much anything. And he even will write, she's great on war and horrible on economics. In my mind, I don't care about any of the other stuff. War's first. Because my money's extorted from me at gunpoint, literally. Well, it hasn't become literal, but it sure would if I resisted it any fashion. And that money's used to kill people overseas. I disagree with that. So to me, the war issue trumps all other issues. I don't care. When they say, "Wow, we get the socialists in there, she'll run the domestic economy and she'll give us social." First of all, both parties are for socialized medicine. Okay, both parties spend money like it's going out of style. Both parties are the exact same. It doesn't matter. You're going to get what I think it's Tom Woods. It doesn't matter who you vote for. You always get John McCain. So if we,
well, I mean, obviously, if a Republican were elected, they wouldn't do something like pass a bunch of tariffs and start a trade war.
No, they wouldn't.
Republican would never do that.
And if Republicans were in, they wouldn't triple Medicaid.
Yeah. John McCain's like the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the dark side.
Right. No matter who. Right. I think it was when George W. was president when they doubled or tripled Medicaid and made it. I can't remember what the numbers were, but it was outstanding. And how is that not
Part D, right? It was the prescription drug part.
Right. So how is that not socialized medicine? It is. And you remember when George W. said that we had to intervene in the free market to save the free market. I don't remember the exact words, but it was basically that. So to keep the market free, we had to make the market not free. It's kind of like, we go to war for peace. He was good at saying stuff like that too.
Mission accomplished.
Right. Mission accomplished. And it definitely was for them. But yeah, in my mind, war policy, foreign policy trumps all policy. I don't care.
You could say that foreign policy is the ultimate economic policy as well.
Yeah.
Because the other stuff is just deck chairs on the Titanic. The military budget's half the entire total budget.
Yep.
Yeah. When it comes to when it comes to the domestic population, they have to put forward a facade to pretend that they love you, so that they can get you to go out and vote and get your obedience and all of that. But when it comes to a foreign population, they don't have to do any of that. They show their true colors. When it comes to the foreign population, it's all about punishment and forcing obedience. And what they do overseas is an example of what they would like to do to you here. They just don't do it so overtly because, they need you to like them a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
You can't be.
You have to. Yeah, there has to be a balance between liking them and fearing them.
Yep.
Enough that they're confused that they don't know which it is.
Something I found interesting about the Joe Rogan interview with her and Jocko is if you go to one of these bags or packs 72-hour guy events, of which I spent an amount of my life in those circles, unfortunately.
We know a few of them.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, if you go to SHOT Show, let's say, which I don't necessarily recommend, but it's something you can do with your life, you'll run into a lot of people who are very hoorah, lock and load, support the troops, blah, blah, blah. And there's a number of anti-war folks there, but it's a really small number. But what's interesting is there's a lot of Jocko Willink fans there. There's a ton of Jocko Willink fans there. And here he is on Joe Rogan with Tulsi Gabbard talking about what's good for America and what's good for Americans, and not rah-rahing an adventurous foreign policy. You have kind of the most, probably the most prolific Navy SEAL of his generation of SEALs, not necessarily being, opposed to all war or something like that, but ideologically holding hands with the only anti-war candidate running on either side.
On either side.
So it'll be very interesting to see what impact that has for the in the bags are packed community.
Now, Crazy Bernie, Uncle Bernie, he supposedly is somewhat anti-war, but that's not any part of his platform, I don't believe. Because I think Ron Paul worked with him a little bit during the Iraq fiasco, but I don't think he brings it up at all anymore, where Gabbard's platform is, I am anti-war. And she kind of keeps it at regime change, anti-regime change. We must stop the regime change stuff. And I think that's partly focus group stuff, because it's just saying I'm anti-war. That's pretty broad. Having wars for regime changes isn't so popular anymore, because it's worked out so well in the last 18 years that people are finally starting to figure out, why are we doing this? And she has, if you want to call it legitimacy, to a lot of the masses, she has legitimacy in that she actually went over there and was in the war. You have all these war hawks, and Ron Paul used to call them the war chicken hawks, that are pro-war, go regime change, pro-regime change, go everywhere, send the military everywhere, blah, 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 blah. Not one of them have ever served. It's funny, Ron Paul was the only one back then that had ever served in the military, and he was anti-war. And so in this way, she's the same, along those lines, as she's anti-war and still is. I think she's in the reserves, Army Reserves, or something like that. She's a medic. Is she a medic? I don't know that for sure. But anyways, what David said earlier too is that she's basically the hidden candidate, the one that doesn't get, the one that gets ignored at all the debates. 2 debates ago, she was actually not invited. But she did make the last one, or last 2 or whatever, and she stuck to her guns. And people have been, showing, I think what's great is they're showing their true colors, is that they're attacking her for being anti-war. And usually what she says is, I just want to bring my brothers and sisters home. And she, referring to them as their military brothers and sisters. I just want to bring them home. Let's bring them home. And it's just great that the Democratic Party is doing the same thing that the Republican Party did to Ron Paul, because it shows that it has nothing to do with political left or right. They're all the same, and it's all about war.
Right.
It's all about war. Every single one of those sapsuckers are getting money from the military-industrial complex, and it's good for them to keep it going. Then, what was it, last week or 2 weeks ago, Hillary Clinton actually attacked her and called her a Russian asset.
A Russian asset.
She talked about that on the Rogan show.
Oh, she did? Good.
Yeah, and and that's Hillary Clinton. She's never been in the military either, but she did serve in as a State Department head, giving weapons to ISIS, and she was caught.
Well, she did a great job in Libya.
Yeah.
turning Libya into a hellhole. Yes. I actually think she scored points. Gabbert's actually scored a few points having Hillary come out against her. I don't think that she necessarily looked at that as a detriment to her campaign at all.
They talked about that a little bit, like the irony of being attacked from the establishment, directly from the establishment, is that it greatly improves your credibility as the anti-establishment candidate.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, I mean, if for a person that they don't want to have any publicity, the worst thing they could have done was have Hillary Clinton get on some show and call her out. I mean, that's just like, oh, lots of publicity.
So there's another fun part about the Hillary Clinton thing, which is that she sort of fired back, and said Tulsi Gabbard defended herself and sort of called out Hillary Clinton's track record. And she said that when she got back to Washington after that, a bunch of people were really, really concerned for her. They were like, are you sure it's a good idea to criticize anything about what the Clintons do?
Wow.
Yeah. And so she joked about that a little bit with Rogan.
Might get Epsteined.
Right. And they're like, I'm not saying, Rogan was like, I'm not saying that there's a thing there, but, there is a term called the Clinton body count.
Yep. A lot of people have committed suicide because of them. A lot of people.
Yep.
How many people that have 59 people around them who've committed suicide?
Only them.
Only Hillary Clinton, yeah.
Which is another fun thing. It's not a secret, right? People joke and kid about it and just kind of offhandedly mention it. But the Clintons really are murderers. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about it. It's kind of like the JFK thing now. We all know he was assassinated by his own government, right? We all know that the Gulf of Tonkin was a false flag thing. We all know that the United States government knew about the Japanese going to attack Pearl Harbor. And there's all these things that we all know. We also all know that the Clintons murder people. Mm-hmm. We all know it. And yet it's still, people are so enamored by authority. They just can't, they're so enamored by it. They're so scared of it or something. They need authority so bad that even knowing that she's a murderer, she still has a place in our society as an authority figure. I mean, she should be reviled. I mean, a lot of people do. Republicans do, but for the wrong reasons, all because she's a Democrat, not because she's a murdering, lying thief. That's why she should be reviled. But it's just because she's on the wrong party.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, people tend to focus more on look at where you're at rather than how did you get there. And I think people also, being that she's the woman candidate or has been, and people have just, women especially, have identified with the idea that the first woman president. It's like identifying with the package rather than what's inside of the package.
Right.
Actually, it kind of has worked.
Right.
True.
It's just given a bad name to it.
Well, and there were large demographics of women who voted for Trump.
Yeah,
preferentially in the last election.
Right. Yeah, and more so now. She's really lost her appeal there.
Well, besides sending her to prison or hanging her or any number of things that she deserves, I can't think of anything better, really, than her losing to Donald Orange Man Trump. I mean, that's just great. She can never live that down. That will always be a part of her political career. She lost to the Great Pumpkin.
Yeah.
I mean, that's tremendous. She'll never live that down.
In a rigged game, no less.
No joke. She had the whole thing rigged on both sides and still lost. Oh, it's tremendous. It's so tremendous. There are rumors that she's going to jump back in, but I don't know that. I hope she does just for political theater, but I doubt it.
Well,
Trump would have a heyday. Oh my gosh, would he have a heyday if she came back in?
Well, the information that's out right now is that Trump would win anyway.
Yeah.
And even among the women voters, they've done polls showing that.
If Trump was smart, he would reach out to Tulsi Gabbard now, and because Gabbard's not going to win. I mean, there's no doubt about it. She's not going to be the Democratic nominee. They won't allow it, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be the same. Even if she was leading in the polls and whatever, she would still never be the nominee.
And you should want her to. I mean, she seems to be a good person. And why would you want to thrust her in that position?
Right. There's always that. But if Trump was smart, he would reach out to her now and say, hey, look, you're not going to win.
Right.
Why don't you come over and before the election, why don't you come over and join me and I'll make you Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State. Yeah. Somewhere along those lines.
Well, he could even do the appointment after she gets shown the exit.
True.
So she was on I didn't know this. This was on the interview she did with Rogan. She was like the vice chair of the DNC or something last election.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she resigned in order to support Bernie, I think.
Well, she resigned because she got wind of or firsthand knowledge of what they were doing to Bernie at the time.
Well, yeah, and I think she wasn't allowed to endorse anybody as somebody who was on the DNC.
Correct.
Okay.
So she resigned to support him, which shows that she's quite fallible along her economic views. But again, economic views are secondary in my book. All domestic views are secondary in my book. Quit killing people overseas. We deserve what we get here. That's kind of how I look at it. If we have to suffer because some piece of crap that is a socialist and tears down our economy, blah, blah, whatever, we deserve it. Quit murdering people. You know, kind of like biblical judgment on the country. But if anyone gets in that says, I'll bring the troops home, which, let's talk about this real quick, though. Is it feasible? Would it even be allowed? Look at Trump. How many times did he said, I'm pulling out of Syria, and it still hasn't happened? He was going to get out of Afghanistan. He was going to get out of Iraq. He was going to get out of Afghanistan. He was going to stop this. He was criticizing Obama for going into Syria in the first place, or for bombing Syria and doing that. And then what does he do? He sends troops into Syria to fight ISIS, supposedly. I think we ourselves, the three of us talking here, we know that the actual power of a president is nil. Yeah. He's a talking head because you don't want to get JFK'd. JF killed. But but just to have someone speaking it out, I think the platform, Tulsi Gabbard has a platform, and if she can speak out and speak out against war, get people thinking about it, that's at least something good, And another thing back on Trump, he was the anti-swamp, he was the anti-war candidate, and look at who he appoints to his cabinet positions. And they're all the swamp. I mean, he literally had to throw a hook out and drag these people out of the swamp. That's how deep they were in. You know, his supposedly pro-war, and he hires John Bolton. Come on. That guy is John McCain's biological, I don't know. They're twins. They just didn't look like each other. Well, they're both nasty and ugly, so they kind of look like each other. But besides that, I don't see her going anywhere. But I do think Trump should. Oh, back to what you were saying about the Wenzel article, David. The Tom Woods, he sends out a newsletter, and he said something about
her closing remarks.
Yes, her closing remarks. She called it a big fail, and Wenzel disagreed and said non-big fail. Said she did perfect, exactly what she should have done. And I guess she actually is kind of reaching out to libertarians in that she knows that libertarians are anti-war. So she's reaching out to them a little bit. Actually used the name libertarian in her remarks. Like, come join me. Unfortunately, no one told her that most libertarians don't vote. At least not the real ones. There's the libertarian lights that don't quite got it figured out yet. But Wenzel actually met with her when she came to San Francisco and spoke. He got to have a little time just because he's media or whatever, and had a little time to talk with her. And I forget some other rally. Some guy that got to talk, had a minute to talk to her or whatever, gave her the full set of the Tuttle Twin books, which I thought was great.
Bad.
So that was pretty cool. Gave her the set of that. Maybe she'll look at them. Maybe she threw them in the trash. Who knows? But it's a smart way to. I thought I couldn't think of anything better than the Tuttle Twin book set to give her. I mean, what would she more likely read? That, or she's definitely not going to read Man, Economy, and State, but even Anatomy of the State. She'd probably just like, chuck it. Murray Rothbard, what's that? But the Tuttle Twins is, for kids. Maybe she looked at it. Maybe she gave it to her. I don't know if she has any kids. Maybe she gave it to her nephews. Her dad, on the other side, I believe, is quite conservative, if I'm right. I think she grew up in a semi-conservative family.
I wouldn't describe her as temperamentally liberal.
Right. That's the point.
I would describe her as considered. She seems like she's considered her positions, which is not a word I would use for like Bernie. I don't know. Bernie's considered much of anything. And then somebody like Clinton would be more conniving.
Yeah.
Like Clinton tends towards the sociopath side of things, and Bernie tends towards the
crazy
ideal sort of side of things. And she seems like a moderate in a bunch of different ways. Like in the ways that aren't, I'm trying to find the safest route. That she seems like a moderate in the sense of I'm trying to figure out what the reasonable position between the extremes is. Not the safest position, but the most reasonable.
So probably,
and even the socialism stuff is kind of like that.
Right.
There's nothing resembling a free market in healthcare in the U.S. There hasn't been for a long time, and there never will be. There's no path to that, and so it's I don't know. It's stupid to talk about it, and it's especially stupid if you're listening to a Republican who's talking about it. Like, they're not the fool, you are. So the fact that she talks about fixing socialized medicine doesn't particularly bother me.
Right. I agree. I just looked this up real quick because what you mentioned. She is an advocate of criminal justice reform. So,
Frank Turney and supporter.
Yeah. Tulsi Gabbard calls on Congress to end the failed federal marijuana policy, the Passmore Act. Says we need to fix our broken criminal justice system. So I think what you're saying, Dave, maybe a word to use, that she seems to be sincere in her beliefs, at least.
Good word.
Where most politicians, the other ones you were talking about, are more opportunistic in their beliefs. For sure. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of maybe what she believes also, when you're saying moderately, she's from Hawaii, she is Hawaiian or whatever. And so a lot of what she believes could be cultural too. You know, I think that has to be taken into account from where people are from. And, you know, I'm not Hawaiian. I don't know anybody that is. But a lot of her beliefs, you know, with when we say socialism, the way that she looks at it or whatever, may be centered culturally around the way the Hawaiian culture is or something, you know, in a smaller community setting where she's looking at it nationally. They're different, but I don't know that. I'm just conjecturing. Could be.
What's the word on the street with the the ever useless talking heads of the Republican Party, like the Hannitys and Limbaughs and whatnot, with her? Do you guys know?
I don't think they talk about her. No, I think Hannity one time. What was it? Hannity mentioned her one time, just in that they were not mentioning her. But I mean, those guys aren't going to say much about her because they're all about war, pro-war. Yeah, I don't know, Dave. Maybe I will actually do our listeners a service and hurt my own brain cells and tune in a couple times this week, see if they're brought up at all. I didn't listen. You know that Tom Woods and Lou Rockwell do a podcast on Tom Woods' podcast after each debate, and I haven't listened to the last several. Now I wish I would have, but I remember one of them that I listened to after a debate. They had at least Lou had very good things to say about Tulsi, just because, you know, obviously he's like, she's the only one that even mentioned it, and they're ridiculing it. And he made the comparison about, you know, what they did to Ron also, you know, because Ron Paul was a little bit further than that. They hated him for his economic policies too. They didn't like him just because he was anti-war. They did not like his end the Fed, audit the Fed, and the government. Most government people don't like end the government, but what she never actually said. You know, Ron was very controlled in the way that he talked about reform in the welfare state, which is why a lot of Republicans didn't like him, because, you know, Republicans love war, but they hate welfare. We got to get all those blacks off of welfare and all those single moms off of welfare and blah, blah, blah. And Ron had the position of, yep, we sure do, but we're not going to cut it off overnight. There's too many people that are dependent on it, that we've, as the government, have made them dependent on it, and we're not going to just kill them by cutting them off. We'll do, I think he had a 5-year plan or something for it, which would have worked because he's Ron Paul. But did you see this comment from our buddy Rick? He says, speaking of sincerity, Hillary had both a public and private position on things. I do remember that. Yeah, which is
yeah, she's made that comment during one of her talks, didn't she? Yeah.
How can you be a politician? Well, privately, I think this way, but in my public positions, they are. I think the one thing she is sincere about, both publicly and privately, though, is just murdering people. So I don't think we're given a rounding endorsement to go out and vote for Tulsi Gabbard, which would be against our own convictions, both public and private. But it is interesting to, give her a little bit of exposure to people that do vote, and more so exposure to being anti-war and the I don't know what the word is I want to use, just how really the state's politicians, the real colors, the true colors really get shown whenever someone like that's on stage.
Yeah, the Ron Paul campaign was a great way for so many people to end up becoming anarchists and voluntarists. And so let Tulsi Gabbard do the same for others. Because people get involved, they'll realize how corrupt and insincere that system is, how fake it is. Tulsi Gabbard may just appeal to them a little more than Ron Paul did, or she comes at a different time. So, well,
when he was able to have his little, I think it was like 2 or 3 or 4 minutes that he got to talk to her, when he, I guess, some kind of interview when she was in San Francisco, he believed at the time that it's like, look, this is the closest candidate we have to turn from the dark side into, he thought she was the best chance of any of the candidates to turn towards libertarianism out of all of them, which is interesting. I've never talked to her. He has. So he must have saw something in their talk, I would think, that led him to think that way. I don't know.
I wonder what our audience, what our callers think of like Gabbard versus Trump. It'd be interesting to see, while there's no chance of her ever getting the nomination, that would be a very interesting thing to see where people came down on that one.
Yeah.
If I participated, I kind of know where I would come down on that one.
Yeah. Pretty simple. Which our phone number is 907-458-8255. I guess I haven't given that out in a while. If you'd like to call, and we'll listen to anything you want to say. But if you want to have a comment about Tulsi Gabbard, who is the one of the many Democratic candidates running for president against the Donald. I like what Rick says here. He says it would be fun, I think, to see Tulsi debate the Great Orange. There's no doubt about it. That would be a fantastic debate. That would be a fantastic debate. And, there is much like when Ron Paul, and I think he was right when he was running, if things weren't rigged and all that kind of, let's just say things are legitimate. When Ron said, I have a much better chance of beating Barack Obama than, what was Dipstick's name? Who's the guy who got the nomination? The loser.
Romney and McCain?
Romney. Yeah, well, yeah, both times, actually. But during Romney's thing, he said, look, I can beat Barack. Romney's not going to beat anyone. And I think he was right. Enough people from the other side would have, because all Republicans would have voted for Ron. And even though I think quite a few Republicans voted for Hillary in the last go around, the real statist. But Tulsi said that I'm actually the only legitimate candidate that can beat Trump. And she's probably right. She's probably right, because there's probably enough, most Democrats would vote for her, and there's probably a few Republicans that aren't too happy with the Great Orange that would vote for her. It would be an interesting one. And like Rick said, the debate stage would be fantastic. I mean, because, oh my gosh, what can you say to her? I mean, everyone kind of hated Hillary, so everyone kind of rah-rah cheered when he would attack Hillary Clinton. But it'd be pretty hard to attack Tulsi, because she's, as she says, she's a woman of color. She's a woman, and she serves in the military. Eesh. Pretty hard to attack that politically. Politically. And economically, what would they do? Well, I can spend more money than you.
The easiest way to do that is with war.
Right. Well, the only way that they could, the only difference between the two would be the war issue. Trump would have a really hard time saying that he was the anti-war one.
Well, he is played up as the anti-war president.
Right.
Which,
how?
Well, like we pointed out before, it's not the president has minuscule power. All he is a yes man and a figurehead. Pentagon decides on that.
Right. He's like
other people decide on that.
He's like the first president that's ever wanted to have like a red square parade of the military go down. The guy's a nut for power. He's a nut job.
Maybe he's just the most honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's inadvertently honest, or maybe advertently.
I'm sure he's not the only president who's wanted to have a red square parade.
True. His handlers just don't do very well at keeping him silent. Maybe that's the issue. But I don't know. She'll go into oblivion, and like I said, it would be pretty cool if he reached out and said, "Hey, come into the administration here," which I don't see him actually doing that, but it would be kind of neat. Secretary of State would be bomb. That would be awesome. That would be awesome. I don't know who is now.
I don't know.
Is it Pompeo? Or is he
not sure?
Defense.
I don't keep track of it anymore.
I don't know who it is either. He has a rotating door of all the people that go in and out of there, so I have no idea. It was Rex Tillerson.
Yeah.
And then
he's gone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
he got fired.
Right. And then Bolton was.
No.
What position was he?
He was like chief of staff. No, he wasn't chief. He was advisor, some kind of advisor. Moron. I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, it would be interesting. I don't see it happening. You know, when she was on The View last couple weeks ago, it was interesting because the white ladies there that were attacking her, like
the big Hillary supporter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Attacking her like crazy. And so I think The View has 3 or 4 commies on it and then 1 conservative.
McCain's daughter, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. You're right. It's
Meghan McCain.
Meghan McCain. She was actually defending Gabbard, which I thought was interesting. It is Pompeo. Okay. Secretary of State. It was in Target Liberty. I guess she was defending her, and then the other person that is what's her face? Whoopi Goldberg was actually on her side, on Gabbard's side. Was semi-defend, not attacking her, at least. Like the one commie, the Hillary supporter lady, was like just freak showishly. All right, Bolton. Okay, Bolton was the NSA director. Oh,
that's right. Yeah.
Good place for him. Good place for him. Good night. Why do we even have one of those?
An NSA or a director of the NSA?
Both. Both. Why? Secretary of State. I mean, that's a pretty important position, I think, as far as if there's going to be a government position. The person who is Secretary of State is pretty important, I think. And she would be great. Send her to go talk to Kim Jong-un, whatever his name is, North Korean dictator. Then send her to go talk to, she already has talked to the Syrian guy, Assad, al-Assad, so it'd be easier for her to go talk to him. I don't I don't think that she would get in there because I don't think she's pro-Israel enough, though. I'd have to read.
Oh, into Secretary of State?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think that she's...
Or president, especially.
Yeah.
You have to be...
Well, that was something that was there.
Yeah, you have to be backed by that to get in.
AIPAC.
AIPAC.
The theme of her Rogan interview with Jocko was that they were both on Team America, so to speak. Which is a team you can be on, I guess, if you're going to be politically involved in America. That's probably the team to be on. And so Rogan was talking to Jocko, and he's like, I've never really heard you talk about politics. And Jocko's like, that's because he said something along the lines of, that's because my position is what's best for America. No one talks about that anymore, so there's nothing for me to talk about. Everyone talks about what's best for them, or what's best for some group, right? What's best for some oppressed subgroup, or some group that's been overlooked, or some new group, or some group that isn't even made up of Americans, or whatever, right? Whatever it may be. And so their conversation continually circled back to what's best for actual Americans, which was very similar to what Ron Paul talked about, but in a different. I mean, she does it in a different way, and that's what's interesting. Ron Paul would do it through more abstract ideas, like economics, and then policy, like the idea of blowback. Right, the idea of blowback is an idea that you have to think about and process. And it was easy for people to say, "Oh, Ron Paul's he's a victim blamer. He thinks that America deserved to be attacked on 9/11," and that's not at all what he said. But he didn't talk about direct, like A, B, C. He assumed you already knew the alphabet, which was one of his mistakes. And Gabbard doesn't talk down to her audience, but she doesn't assume that any of them have cracked a book. And so I think that's where some of her socialism in her economic policies comes from, is she has to, if you're going to talk to people who haven't read a book and probably don't know the alphabet, then you have to take things down a few levels, and you'll water down a lot of anything that concerning long-term planning gets washed out. But she has the same overarching message, or a similar overarching message of what's good for America and Americans, but not in the abstract, and not in the Donald Trump sense either. It's less rah rah, I guess I would say.
So it looks like she is for, of course, equal rights for all, Medicare for all, end foreign wars. She's for the 15 an hour minimum wage, which that's too bad, because that just hurts the people she said she wants to help.
It helps the robot industry, though.
I think she's against the robot industry. Co-sponsored the Fairness for High-Skilled Immigrant Act. So she's pretty, I guess, pro-immigrant. She was part of the DREAM Act and stuff, which I don't really know enough about the DREAM Act to be too. I don't know if it was necessarily a good thing. I mean, legislation isn't a good thing. Just, we don't need legislation to make things better. We need to get rid of laws. That's what makes things better, not more laws to compound the issue. The bad in the issues. But yeah, she's not the worst of things. But like I said, war's the thing. Americans deserve what they get at home. Actually, we don't. We don't deserve those jerks. But if they're going to go vote, maybe.
Well, it's the consequences of the game.
Right. It might come home someday.
Yeah, well, it is now. Yeah. It's interesting there aren't more opinions about her out there, or there are, and everybody's real quiet about it. Tucker is the only guy on mainstream news who I've seen have her on repeatedly, and that's because war is his big issue too.
Every week, isn't it? She's on about it.
He talks about her a lot. She's been on there a number of times.
Yeah, he's hammered the president more than once on. I mean, like with the Syria thing, right when we were almost going to war there, he freaked out when they shot down our drone or whatever. And the bombers were in the sky. 5 minutes before they dropped their bombs, I changed my mind. Blah, blah, blah. Bull crap. It's kind of that whole scenario, I think, is a biggie baloney. But yeah, he has her on. Well, and the only one. I don't think anyone else does. I think, at least not on Fox News, there's definitely no one else that would ever have her on.
Like I said, not that I've seen, and that's why I was curious if you guys had seen Hannah Dierbeck or any of those guys.
No.
Okay.
All right, well, that does it for the hour. So we'll be back right after these good messages from our friends at Fox News. Speakers.
KFAR 660 AM Fairbanks, K248DK 97.5 FM Fairbanks, the heartbeat of Alaska.
ISIS claiming responsibility. I'm Joe Chiro, Fox News. The Islamic State terror group saying through its news service that it was behind the London attack that left 2 people dead and 5 injured.
Yesterday's terrorist attack is a reminder that despite ebbs and lulls in the pace of terrorism, it persists, and that vigilance by governments and citizens cannot wane. 28-year-old Usman Khan, a British citizen whose family came from Pakistani-controlled Kashmir, was radicalized in part through internet propaganda. Among his long-term plans was to set up a terrorist training camp in Pakistan, much like Osama bin Laden did in Afghanistan.
Fox's Doug McAlway. One of the injured is in critical but stable condition. One is stable, and the third has less serious injuries. A 35-year-old homeless man has been arrested by Dutch police for questioning and the stabbing attack on 3 teens in The Hague. The man's name has not been released. The victims, 2 15-year-old girls and a 13-year-old boy, were treated in a hospital and released late Friday. A powerful storm that's been pummeling the Midwest is now targeting the Northeast next, where millions of travelers there will be affected.
This system has been wreaking havoc across the country for the last few days. It came across California with driving rain, then made its way to Arizona with snow, rain, even tornado warnings around the Phoenix area. One twister ripped the roots out of soil at a park and damaged some houses.
That's Fox's Jackie Heinrich reporting. This year's Black Friday was the biggest ever for online sales, and Adobe Analytics says carts filled on phones, computers, and tablets rang up $7.4 billion in transactions. That ranks just behind the $7.9 billion haul of last year's Cyber Monday. America is listening to Fox News.
I'm Neil Cavuto from Fox Business. In high school,
are you feeling distressed about a decision you have made in the past? Talking about it can help. Whether your abortion was last month, last year, even 30 years ago, it can still affect you today. Take the first step to healing. The PATH program is offered without charge by the Find Out Free Pregnancy Center, providing a safe and confidential place to find healing. Call the Hope Line at 455-8258 for more information about PATH and their weekly meeting times. Call 455-8258 or visit at carenetfairbanks.com.
Spirit of Alaska Federal Credit Union is now providing interior Alaskans with local health savings accounts, or HSAs. If you have a high deductible health insurance plan, saving money with an HSA makes sense. We can help with the details at a local branch. Then open your HSA account right there. Find out more about our health savings accounts and their advantages at spiritofak.com. Spirit of Alaska moves forward every day with local and innovative solutions for your financial health. Federally insured by the NCUA. Conquer snow on a 2020 Yamaha snow machine from Alaska Fun Center. Choose from one of these Yamaha workhorses. The legendary VK540 two-stroke wide track with amazing towing capability, high-low transmission, and under-seat storage. Also, check out the new Transporter 600, equipped with stealth control, superb handling, rugged storage rack, and tow hitch. Long-range fuel capacity. Need more? The almighty Yamaha VK Professional 4-stroke 20-inch wide track features power steering and high-low range. Alaska Fun Center on College Road.
The Mouse King and his army threaten to steal Christmas. Can Clara and the Nutcracker Prince stop him? Be there for one magical Christmas Eve when toys become real and dream becomes adventure. North Star Ballet presents The Nutcracker. Performances in Herring Auditorium, December 6th through 8th. Buy your tickets now from Enchanted Forest Toys, Bentley Mall Safeway, Spirit of Alaska Johansson Branch, Artisan Courtyard, at the box office, or online. The Nutcracker, December 6th, 7th, and 8th. Sponsored in part by the radio station.
With a sprinkling of dream light and dash of good cheer, wishing you and your family joy to last the new year. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to all. From Kirk and Dana Krause and the entire staff of Bigfoot Pumping and Thawing.
Happy holidays from the fine folks at King Cab at 452-2222. Remember to enjoy the holidays responsibly and leave the driving to them. Check out their new and improved phone app, King Cab Alaska, for Apple and Android devices. Happy holidays from King Cab, 452-2222.
When might you be buzzed? When you suddenly love everything.
You guys, I love this song. I love these nachos. I love our kickball league. Oh, I love this guy. What's your name? You know what I'd love? A ride when it's time to head out.
If you see a buzzed warning sign, call for a ride when it's time to go home. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
I love your car. Is this real leather?
All right, welcome back to Patriot Cement. That was August Burns Red. The album's called Sledding Hill, and it is good. It's really good. You hear that, Rick? August Burns Red. Look him up. You like Sledding Hill. Christmas album. Nice little Christmas album. All right, welcome back to Patriot Cement. My name is Josh Bennett. Got Mike Anderson in here, and David on the interwebs, as strange people call them.
It's plural, interwebs.
Interwebs, many series of tubes.
Many series.
No singular.
Yeah, that worked for me. They always called it that. I'm not really familiar with the interwebs. I'm like, the what? Internet? Okay. Oh, boy. Our phone number is 907-458-8255. And this is usually when people start calling and then we don't have enough time to take all the phone calls. So it's your fault, not ours. Dave, you had a little subject you wanted to kick this off with. Let's do it. Sounded good. I liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, so the subject will be preference falsification is the name of what I'm going to talk about. Preference falsification. And so when in the last hour we were talking about Tulsi Gabbard and how she comes across as sincere and genuine, and Hillary Clinton, and how in contrast, Hillary Clinton has two sets of beliefs. There's the public one and the private one. And preference falsification is about exactly that. And the guy who first started using that term is this social scientist, Timur Kuran, Kuran, Timurkuran. I'm going to post the Wikipedia for preference falsification in the live chat.
That's what I was going to do.
So if you're on youtube.com/Radio Free Fairbanks watching our live chat, you can follow along at home. So there's another guy who started talking about it in the context of contemporary issues, this guy Douglas Murray. And Douglas Murray is he's a British guy who has been, I guess, sort of reporting on and writing sort of pop social science books on the decline of Europe, changes in Britain and Brexit and issues around that. And he doesn't really take a political position. He's more of an observer and a diagnoser of social issues. So this idea of preference falsification is this. It's that if you live in a society where differences in public discourse are heavily penalized socially. Okay, so it's legal to have differences of opinion, but if you express them socially, people jump down your throat, and people stop buying from your store, and people stop, letting you, drive your car out of your driveway or whatever. If you live in a world like that, you'll develop two sets of values. You'll develop a set of values that you talk about with people in public, with your coworkers, people you run into at the store. And then you'll have your true set of values, which is your private set of values. And so this is called preference falsification or concealed preferences. And so when you're out in public and, somebody, let's say you're British, right? And you're out at the store and the cashier is talking to the guy in front of you at the checkout, and the cashier's like, blah, 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 people who want to do Brexit are a bunch of hillbilly racist idiots and they should all be strung up or something like that. And the guy in front of you in line says, yeah, what a bunch of idiots. I'd throw a pie in the face of somebody if they were pro-Brexit. And then the cashier turns to you and says, what do you think about Brexit? Well, easiest thing to do is Brexit's for idiots. I'd never support it. And so it costs you nothing. There's no social cost to taking that position. Because it just gets you through the line. You can buy your groceries, you can go home, you don't get in a fight with anybody. Makes life easy. And then you have a secret ballot, which is how elections work. And at the secret ballot, there's no social cost to having an unpopular opinion. And so this is how you get sudden changes in people's preferences, like the Brexit vote or the Trump election, is you create a society that's so weak and thin-skinned that no one can talk about opinions outside of a very narrow window. But people will still hold those opinions in private. So you have a public set of opinions or preferences and a private set of opinions or preferences. And whenever people have a chance to express their private preferences, their true preferences, in a way that impacts the society, it appears that the course of that society is changing radically over a short period of time, but it really isn't. It's really that you have this heavy undercurrent that can't be seen, but it's always there. So this is the whole idea of preference falsification, which of course is rampant today because public discourse really isn't allowed, even on conservative AM talk stations. You have this convergence of opinion, even among the, we were just talking about Tulsi Gabbard as a I don't know, a liberal Ron Paul or a Democrat Ron Paul. She falls outside the mainstream of the liberal media, and Ron Paul falls outside the mainstream of the conservative media because the conservative and liberal media are so dang similar that it's hardly even worth having the distinction. Like, the distinction is strictly for marketing purposes. And if you think the distinction is real, well, the marketing has worked. So congratulations. So anyway, so Douglas Murray expounds on this more broadly, and he says that this gets into all sorts of other issues in Europe where people will think they're going along with popular sentiment because of the discourse, but the discourse has been sanitized, and then the popular sentiment appears to change suddenly. And so it washes out people's ability to trust in people who they don't know. Because the only way to know what someone's concealed preference is, what their private preference is to get to know them really well. So the ability to relate quickly to someone who you don't know directly, which is usually what happens in a society, like you could say in a culture, right? When you have cultural norms that are actually true, that are the real set of preferences, is you can make a safe set of assumptions about certain basic things that other people believe. But right now, because that discourse isn't allowed, no one can trust anyone. It all becomes secret squirrel stuff. And any conversation you have with somebody, like you go out in public and you have a conversation with somebody you meet at the grocery store, at a bar, at a traffic light waiting to cross the street as a pedestrian, you have to do all this weird dog whistling, and you have to, put out the secret word and see if they respond right. Which, the libertarians know about that a bunch. It's like, oh, well, it's like taxation of steps is one of them, but there are some more subtle ones. Like, you throw out words like voluntarism or non-coercive interaction between individuals. And then somebody's like, oh yeah, if they identify that really quick, that, your dog whistle has been successful. But anyway, that's happening in society at large. And it's creating this breakdown, which creates this apparent instability, and it creates this deep mistrust across everybody. And then as the trust breaks down between people, the trust in the system breaks down, and then the system itself starts to break down. So soon, the idea of expressing your concealed preference with a secret ballot is the next thing to be gone after. That'll be one of the next things that people go after, because we shouldn't allow people to lie about their preference. And so we should get rid of the ability to express a different preference in secret. And so you chase all that down until you end up with some form of either totalitarianism or chaos. Take your pick. But that's where that sort of goes.
Well, people are pretty, as far as the secret ballot, they get pretty riled when you ask, well, who did you vote for? Or that's my own business. And I've always thought that's kind of funny because it's like, why is it your business? Your voting affects me.
If it works.
Right. But why does it get to be secret? I want to know what dirty rat thing that you voted for. I mean, because I don't mind telling people I didn't vote. But then people that do, I mean, it's a big deal to have the secret vote, close up the things and then.
Well, telling somebody, that's one of the fun things about having a position of abstinence from violence over other people is when you say, I didn't vote, you're not falsifying your preference. You're really hanging it out there. Right? You're really hanging it out there. You're saying, my preference is that your opinions don't impact me physically in my life by force. And I'm expressing my preference for how you should behave towards me by granting you that respect first. I'm granting you the respect of autonomy over your own life by not assuming I should have autonomy over you. And so it's a consistent position.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the reasons it upsets people greatly. And this fits into certain aspects of what believers in the gospel are called to do, which is to not falsify preferences. Preference falsification is not something that believers are supposed to do. Believers are supposed to live in the maximum degree of congruence possible. They're supposed to be as aligned as possible towards this ideal that Christ embodied, which is really hard to do, and everybody fails at it. But that is a very subversive act, to do that, to align your preferences and then to live them out. And I think that same thing applies not just for believers, but for people in general. And this is you have a bunch of examples of this. One of which would be the Jordan Peterson thing that happened, where he came out against this compulsory free speech bill, and which was not a religious statement or anything. It was really a political one. But he comes out against it and he says, I'm not gonna do this. This is where I draw the line. I'm not gonna do it anymore. And it appeared that would be career ending for him, and that he would get crucified for it. And he sort of did, thousands of people came out throwing stones and waving signs and screeching, that screeching sound that we've all grown so familiar with in the last 10 years, got turned on him. But millions of people after a few weeks or a few months came out in support of him. Just this huge groundswell of support. And it was a lot of people who had a concealed or falsified preference who were like, whoa, there's a guy who's publicly expressing a view that I have, and so I'm going to support him. And a lot of people supported him in secret because they could through the internet, but a lot of people supported him verbally as well. And so every time, there have been many cases like this where somebody comes out with a position that is against the mainstream or what you're allowed to say or whatever, and it appears that it's just going to be wiped off the face of the earth for it. And initially that's what happened. But then after a few weeks or a few months, there's this huge swell of support that lifts them back up out of the mire. And it's, I think that's somewhat driven by faith that the truth is the strongest force, which is not something we are taught to believe right now. We're taught to believe that popularity is the strongest possible force. That's what this social media world we live in is all about. Likes, positive reinforcement of socially acceptable behavior is the strongest force in the world. And if you believe that, you'd never say what you believe to be true if it was unpopular. But what's happening is the people who do say what they believe to be true, even though it's unpopular, are finding support that isn't supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm. Which reminds me, make sure that you like our YouTube page and subscribe.
Right? Yeah, like and subscribe to the YouTube. Like, it's going to be down there somewhere. And show, express your preference in public, kind of.
Get our plus it helps our self-value. Well, think about with voting. So I think there's a couple things with it. What people like the the hidden part of it, the secret ballot part. For one, I don't think people like to vote for the loser, right? So they don't want anyone to know who they voted for, especially if they lost. Like if you won, or if they're. I remember the stickers. Don't blame me, I didn't vote for Bush, and then it was don't blame me, I didn't vote for Obama, whatever. And the other part is the public ridicule part. They don't want to be. They don't want to have people confront them on who or what they voted for if that other person disagrees. Confrontation, while Americans love to have other people fight wars overseas, we hate confrontation personally. And we definitely hate to have, to be, like you said, outside of the societal norms or looked upon as being the person that's on the outside. Oh, you think that way? Chuckle, chuckle, whisper, whisper. That person voted this way because he thinks like this in reality. And that's kind of what why it's so important, I guess, why people treasure that being a secret ballot is, one, ridicule, and the other is they don't want to be known as the one that voted for the loser. Because I think a lot of people vote for whatever they think is going to win.
Well, they don't want to be the scapegoat. Oh, you voted for him. You're responsible for this recession or whatever. Which is kind of ironic because they go and they vote for someone. The guy they vote for is in the position of being the scapegoat, right? So there's a little irony there. I'm going to vote for my scapegoat. That's what he's going to be if he wins. But I don't want to be the scapegoat and everyone know that I voted for this guy if he does win because things are going to go wrong. There's like you say with the stickers. I didn't vote for. Don't blame me. I didn't vote for that guy. Well, then okay. So the recession's happening because this other guy's in power. But if your guy was in power, then the recession is happening because of the guy that was in office before that you didn't support, right?
Yeah. Well, that was the great oranges excuse for like, well, look at this. I've been dealing with this crap. It's been going on for the last 8 years.
Right. But in reality, these people have very little power over what's going to happen. They happen in cycles. And with conservatives, it's especially interesting. They talk about how they want a free market, right? Or how they support a free market. They believe in free markets. Yet they believe so strongly that the economy is affected by who's in power that it's almost a communist mindset. I need to get this guy in power because that's going to make the economy better, rather than realizing that the market drive is what the economy is about, not the guy that's in power. If you believe so strongly that the guy in power affects the economy like that, then you're a communist.
Well, so which one is their secret belief and which one's their public belief?
Mm-hmm. So there's, to answer that, it seems that their secret belief is that they are, well, I guess communists, or at least socialists. But their public belief is that they're free market conservatives.
Nice. I love that. That's so good.
Awesome. Oh, wow. I do too. I'm looking at what this guy posted up here. Post your ballot. I haven't heard of that before. He says, I can see secret ballots eroded by socially enforced mechanisms like post your ballot on social media. If you don't, you're traitor, or at least untrusted, which is
right. He's talking about that's this whole thing of crossing over It's the whole idea of socially enforcing crossover. It's making it socially compulsory to do things that aren't required by law. But what's funny is that just drives it deeper.
Right. The preference falsification is just going to even solidify it even more, because you're going to, well, I got to put this on my social media, but in secret, I really feel like this about it. We don't. Well, actually, people probably kind of do that too, even when they go grocery shopping. In private, you want to buy that freaking Mountain Dew. I don't care who you are. That thing tastes good. But you're standing around with people that you know, or your wife's there or something, so you're like, I better buy this ice water because it's sugar-free and it tastes good. So publicly, you're showing the world that you're making the right decisions, but your private preference is you want the Mountain Dew.
Yeah, well, maybe your private preference would kill you. So maybe that's a situation where it's a good thing, where it's beneficial, huh?
If you can, bringing them in line with each other is really, that's the sweet spot.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yep.
I was just going to say that now you're talking about having a little bit of conviction and courage in your convictions. And it's like what you were talking about for believers, integrity, right?
For anybody.
Anyone, yeah.
I mean, believers are supposed to do this for sure. Like, it's explicit. It's like, there's one set of ideal values.
It's kind of like part of the job.
It's part of the job. And that's what it means. That's what it means to believe. To be a believer in Christ is to say that you believe that Christ is the Messiah, is to say that Christ embodies the ideal way of being, and if you believe that, you're going to pursue it to the maximum extent you can, which does not mean any perfect. It just means that within your limited capability to do anything, that's what you will pursue. And that's where that's the whole idea of monotheism comes out of this, right? Of focusing in a singular direction of this is truth seeking. It's the whole idea that there's an underlying truth behind everything. Science is born out of this. Science is born out of the killing off of the pantheon of gods and the orientation towards a singular God that is the creator and the creation all at once, everything at once, right? It's this singular embodiment of all truth. And so that's what integrity is. And the pursuit of science, that's what it used to mean. Science and theology and philosophy didn't used to be separate things until the so-called Enlightenment, which took the pursuit of truth and fragmented it into pieces and then pitted the pieces against each other. But anyway, so even if you're a so-called atheistic truth seeker, we've talked about some of the folks we've had on the show who I don't know if they're believers or not, but like Stephan Kinsella, Bob Wenzel, these guys are always updating and revising their opinions on things as they come to a better understanding. Mm-hmm. They're not married to a past position. If they have improved on, if their relationship has matured, they express new understanding of the truth, and that's what this means. They're constantly trying to pursue knowledge with greater integrity.
Right.
Anyway, that's what believers are explicitly called to do, and that's what an honest pursuit of the truth, or what's good for you and your society and your family, is all about. And so, while it appears to be really scary to do so in today's world, if you believe that truth is stronger than lies, then that's what you should be doing anyway. And if you believe that lies are stronger than truth, well, then there's no reason to be upset about the world ripping itself to pieces. because that's the end state of things if you believe that lies are stronger than truth. So this would be like, again, there's a lot of this in the 72-hour bags are packed community. Being super secret squirrel about preparing for the end of the world, because I'm gonna create a sealed time capsule of the truth, and I'm gonna store it away, and then when all hell breaks loose and everybody kills each other, I'll be left, and then the earth can be reborn through this little capsule of truth, which whatever it may be having sufficient weapons to defend yourself when the zombies attack or whatever, or living in a remote enough place that you escape the chaos or whatever, right? There's many different manifestations of it, but it's like an incongruent belief. It's the belief that evil will triumph over good, but simultaneously, if you can stay far enough away from it, because there's no point bringing the truth to evil, because evil's stronger than good. And so instead you're going to put it in a capsule where it will survive untainted, and then when evil wipes itself out, then you'll come back and replant this seed of truth, which somehow won't get corrupted the second time around.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. It's not integrated.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And really, the only thing that you might be giving yourself is 3 days to walk amongst the fresh corpses.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my grandpa said you always have time to do it right the second time. Maybe that's what they're thinking.
And how many times has that been retried?
We're already on the second time.
Oh,
that's where the rainbow comes from.
Dang it! And we've had a lot of time.
We've had a lot of time.
Yeah, I don't even know. I'm just kind of still thinking about this post your ballot thing. I mean, how would you even do that? Because you could just, maybe take a picture of your ballot, and then post it.
Yep, while you're voting.
Oh, then they'll just make it illegal to have a phone in the ballot, in the presence of a ballot box.
Sure.
Or make it illegal to even, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I haven't heard that one before. Preference falsification. Well, I would say too and you kind of talked to it already, but social media for sure has made that even more prevalent. I mean, because whoever you're following or following you or whatever, you don't want to be the dark horse. It's the retard idiot that is against everything else that everyone's jumped on the train with. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be the jag, just another guy. You want to be, part of the cool guy group.
Mm-hmm.
And social media is horrible for that. And like you said, because you want to get the likes. Hit the like button, hit the like button, hit the like button. I've noticed that on Instagram more and more with the so-called anti-government guys. It's like they're getting in a race of who can be more. So it's gone from, just posting memes or writing little things, even in blogs, about who can be the most anti-government. Now it's like who can be the most edgy, on the edge of who can be the most violent anti-government person, right? The big, the boogaloo, the big igloo, which I hadn't even heard of until a few months ago. I'm like, what's the big igloo? We didn't have those around here. And boogaloo and the boyas and all this stuff, and it's more and more prevalent now. And it's like, oh yeah, well I'm the real. And then, I was thinking, how many of these guys even own a gun? Because probably not very many. I learned that in a strange way not in a strange way, but I learned that just kind of over time. All these different libertarians that I talked to were like, yeah, Second Amendment, you take your guns off, and they don't even have a gun. Never owned one. Only one they've seen is on TV. It's like, wait, what? Here, that's kind of that's kind of a preference falsification in a different way. You know, I mean, that might be interesting to talk about too. The other side of it. So we're looking at, you know, well, I'm going to go along with the crowd here, but in secret, I don't really believe in this or that. And then you got the other side of it where, yeah, I'm the radical of the radicals, you know, King Radical here. And really, I'm just Mr. Meek Mouse. And, you know, kind of like with that's what I always thought about the 72-hour bad guys. It's like, yeah, right. You know, we had one that worked here at the station for a while. Anyways, we got a bunch of phone calls now since we're almost out of time. So let's hit them. Hello, caller. You're on the air. Thanks for calling.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Good.
Hey, I want to switch topics and mention that our man Frank passed away last week.
Yes, sir.
Or last Monday, the 25th, and that there is a GoFundMe.com fundraiser for a celebration of life, and I think they might have a cremation. That's what the page was saying.
What's the link to that?
I've got it here on my phone, but if you're on GoFundMe.com and you type in live celebration for Frank Turney in the search bar, you'll find it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they're looking at, the goal is like 10 grand. They're up to $2,000 now, but I just think we could get there if more people knew about it.
Yeah, we dedicated the first hour to Mr. Frank.
Yeah, he was a massive fan of your show, and he'd always post up on his page when you were on, you know, that, hey, don't forget to tune in to you guys. And, you know, he was a big Ron Paul supporter, too. And Bill of Rights, Liberty, Constitution, Founding Fathers, you guys know. So, but if we could get something together where, you know, well, I want to say this real quick. What would be really cool is if we could get him a little place in the Clay Street Cemetery, especially if they do a cremation. It wouldn't take too much space. I know the cemetery is full, but I mean, he was the caretaker and he really cared about that place. It just seems fitting to sneak him in there. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I guess we had a caller earlier that said, oh, you already posted it, Dave? You're so fast.
I got it in there.
Gosh, I'm done.
I'm contributing now.
I'm not even trying to post before you post stuff anymore. But we had a caller said that, was it a caller or was it Rob? Oh. Anyways, I guess somebody in the city council brought it up, and the mayor is considering it also.
Yeah, that's the caller, I think.
Get a plot for him there, which would be fitting, I would think.
Yeah, that'd be great. And that's really all I had for you today, but thanks for the show.
Yeah.
Right on. Thank you for calling in.
Yeah, if you don't have the link for the GoFundMe page, it's easy to find stuff on GoFundMe. Just type in Frank Turney, it'll probably pop up.
Yeah, you can Google GoFundMe and then a little bar and Frank Turney. Yeah. And Dave's got it up on our YouTube page, so you can find it quick.
It's in the live chat right now, yeah.
And there is a nice picture of the Frank I knew right there. Look at that going on. Yeah. Hard to believe. All right, let's keep going on the phones here. Hello, caller, you're up next. Thanks for holding.
Hello.
Hello, Cecily.
Hey, well, I couldn't call in the first hour. I was crying too much. I thought that Frank Turney was a hero, and he did call me a couple of times to help me with my stuff, and he's pretty bravo, and he even stood up for my brother when they took all his stuff from the yard. And then I noticed after he passed that all these posts were coming up saying Frank Turney likes, you know. So I answered every time, Frank Turney is passed. You know, but I don't know who decided to use his name, or if he really does promote those posts up there, Frank Turney likes. So anyway, I hope somebody steps up and be the hero like him. He's surely missed. And for all of the stuff that he stood up for. Yep. And hopefully somebody will stand up for Schaefer Cox as well. and all the other political prisoners that point out the wrongdoings of the government. And as long as everybody's running around voting, they're all begging for a master, and that's not the way to be a human being. Anyway, thank you very much, and God bless, and we'll miss Frank Turney. He's kind of like a Zorro. I remember asking him when he was running, I said, do you think those people in the big club are going to let you in? And obviously not. So anyway.
Yeah, he didn't care if he got in or not, though.
No, he had stuff to say, and at least people could hear. If you're, rabble-razzing from the outside, people will hear you.
Hey, it's a good way to get on Channel 13 and Channel 11 and in the newspaper.
Yeah, and it was amazing because when I was up at the mailbox, the Santa Claus drove by and asked if there's anything we needed. That was great. They were good friends. Anyway, I got to get off because I might cry some more.
All right. Thanks,
Bye.
Cecily. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that is the last caller we have, 907-458-8255, if you want to jump in on the conversation. We were just talking about this thing called preference falsification. And if you didn't tune in the first hour, what these last two callers talking about is Frank Turney has passed away last Monday. And there's a GoFundMe for his, I don't think, they didn't say that there was an actual service date yet, correct?
I don't think that's organized yet.
Okay. All right.
Let's see what the GoFundMe says.
Probably be pretty easy to get a hold of his son. We'll try to get a hold of his son and see what's happening. It sounds like
raise funds for the cremation, memorial, and burial.
Yeah. It sounds like he's taken over. I mean, is that what? It sounds like his son's taken over his Facebook page, so we can probably get a hold of him that way. And just say, yo, what can we do to help? Whatever. Make sure we know so we can. Hopefully, it's at a point in time where we can announce it here for folks. And wow, I'll probably hopefully get a lot of people there and get to meet some of the people that we've always talked about having a Patriot Cement get together. Maybe it'll end up being at Frank's remembrance. Frank's still doing his work. Wow, good job, Frank. All right, let's go back to the calls. Hello, caller, you're up next. Thank you for holding.
Sure thing. My husband wanted me to tell this story, but he's not feeling. He's feeling shy, so it's me calling.
Yeah, I think he's had you tell stories before,
yeah, about Frank. My husband, about 26, 27 years ago, was called up on a first-degree murder trial for a man out of Central. I'm not going to say the man's name because I think he still lives in town, and he was acquitted. And I don't think anyone should hold that against him. And if people don't know in his life, I think that's good. So anyways, this gentleman was going to breakfast with his wife, and somebody opened up on them. A neighbor that they'd had a past issue with was on the porch there at the Central Roadhouse, and he opened up with a gun, thinking, I guess, that this guy was coming to hurt him. Nobody really knows exactly what was in the guy's head. And it ended up with the guy, the assailant's wife was shooting at them. This man's, the man that ended up on trial, his wife was shot. And the guy ended up unloading I think he had a wheel gun, so I think he unloaded all 6 shots into this guy and killed him. He'd already been shot himself. He was in, pain. Anyway, so it ends up being on this trial, and my husband was called up to be on the jury. And it was the first jury trial he'd ever sat. And so he didn't know anything. He knew nothing. He he was going to go in there and he was just going to be on this panel and everything.
Yeah.
And he didn't really know Frank Turney. Frank Turney was the boyfriend of some gal that he worked with at a hotel, but he didn't really know him other than to say hi on the street kind of thing. And Frank walks up to him and says, "You need this," and hands him this pamphlet and walks away. And because, of course, doing anything more than that was probably considered jury tampering.
Right.
So my husband looks at it, and it's all about jury nullification and how you can vote your conscience, which he had never heard of. And he brings it home to me. And of course, back then there was no internet, right? So, not really, but you could access it anyway. So he brings it home to me and he goes, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "Well, I can run to the library and look a couple of these things up for you." And he goes, "Would you do that?" So I ran to the library and I did this, and I come back and I say, "Yeah, it's real." And so he goes in there the next day and he says to the jury, well, it wasn't the next day, it was like a couple of days after they'd listened to all the testimony. And when they got in there to deliberations, he said, "I am not going to find this man guilty. And I'm not leaving until the rest of you agree." To which another person said, "I kind of agree with him." And slowly but surely, they swung all the jurors over and they acquitted this guy.
12 angry men.
Yeah. But initially, it didn't look good. It looked like it was like 2-10. We want to find this man guilty because he had a gun in a public place. And back then, that wasn't really a thing. Although it was here in Alaska, it was a thing. In the lower 48, it wasn't. And a lot of people on that jury were from the lower 48, and they just didn't think that was such a great idea. They were new up. Then, I don't know why I thought I'm like in a room with no radio. But then he also, there was, the guy shot the guy in public. He wasn't in his house. Why didn't he run and hide behind the cars? Well, because his wife was bleeding to death at his feet. There were a lot of different reasons why these people had that they were going to find him guilty. And my husband said, "I don't care what the law says. This man should not be held guilty." And he nullified the jury and swung them over. Later on, I went ahead and I hung a jury on the federal side, knowing that I was doing. But I wasn't doing one on that. That was a firearms. But so Frank had a lot of, I don't know what the word for it is, a lot of reach, a lot of things that he got into, that he got involved with, that sometimes it was just really quiet. As simple as just handing out a pamphlet and saying, "Think about that."
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. And he went to jail just for doing just that thing.
He did. It was not on that one, but yeah, it was on a later one. A couple of years later was when that whole incident went down.
Unfortunately, no one gave those jurors any pamphlets.
Yeah, well, I think probably Frank getting arrested probably scared some people into not wanting to do that, which, I think my husband was out of town at the time, and I know I wasn't going to go down there and hand out pamphlets. It was jail. But, yeah, I admit I'm a chicken.
Well, self-preservation is not a bad thing.
Right.
I mean, we are dealing with the evil's real. It's not a figment. I mean, when we talk about the state and them being murderers and thieves and all these things, these aren't make-believe things that we're talking about. This is real. They're playing the game for real. They're not even playing the game. They're playing life. And
and if it's never happened to somebody else, they really don't see it.
Yeah.
They think that, oh no, the world's a fine place. The government takes care of us all. And it's like, until it doesn't. And then you're stuck there going, well, gee, maybe I should have stood up for the Jews and the Gypsies. Because nobody's standing with me now.
Right.
Yep. For sure.
So I just wanted to say that for Frank, and my husband was kind of pushing me, and I was like, okay, I will share the story.
No, it's a great story. I appreciate that.
All right.
Another star for Frank. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
Yeah. I'm sure there's lots of little stars for Frank on that.
Yeah.
Every time a bell rings, it Jerry nullifies a bad law.
Dang. Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. That reminds me, I want to remind everyone to watch Charlie Brown Christmas here.
And I just confirmed. If you just go to GoFundMe.com, type in Frank Turney, it's the first one that shows up. So I just gave a little. So please go check it out.
His son's name's Nathan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Every time a bell rings. I like that one. The best Christmas movie ever made by mankind. All right. Hello, caller. You are up next. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Lee.
Hello, Lee.
Hello.
City of Fairbanks was fortuitous enough to fire 2 firemen here about 25 years ago. And we had to deal with our phones being tapped. And this is my firm belief that our phones were tapped and that they hired, in fact, did hire an unlicensed private detective to follow Jim and me around and our families, such that they were. And the reason they hired and this is my belief again, the only reason that they hired an unlicensed private detective to follow us around is he would do things that a licensed private detective would lose his license for. And the wiretapping, Jim set them up with some bait, and they fed the bait to me, unbeknownst to me, and it was a verbatim transfer from what he said on the phone to what they put into my ear, and that pretty. And we had beliefs for a long time that things just were happening that shouldn't happen accidentally, but we never could prove it. And so Jim took a bull by the horns and set them up, and they swallowed the bait. Now, the man that fed me the bait was none other than our illustrious John Eberhart, who took the case from, he worked for the city attorney's office at that time, and he later became the mayor of Fairbanks. And Frank interceded on our behalf once when we needed somebody to go into the clerk's office and get a document that the city attorney put out. And when Frank went in to get it, they hummed and hawed, and when the city attorney showed up in the office, finding out that Frank was there asking for this phony document, he unleashed and some foul language and referring to Frank with an IQ of some number less than 100 for sure. And the city clerk wrote a letter and documented this occurrence, but you got to dig a long time to ever find a copy of that letter, because she was very honest. And of course she's dead now. That was Nancy De Leon, another long-term employee of the city, but she wasn't a member of the establishment. We'll call the bad guys the establishment. But the city attorney, Frank Cuss, and Mr. Eberhart conspired, and Mr. Turney was involved in a number of call-outs for Despain and Rice, and I owe him a terrible amount of indebtedness, and he will be missed. As Cecily said, he certainly will be missed.
Yep. For sure. Well, thank you for that call. Appreciate that.
Well, thanks for the program.
You bet. Thanks.
Good day.
We got one more here. We'll try to squeeze in before the end. Hello, caller, you're up next.
Hi, one quick one before you go.
You betcha.
Frank Turney, bless his heart. He got arrested for not passing out fully informed jurors things. He got arrested for bullhorning in front of the jury room about juror rights, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back for them, and that's why they arrested him.
Go Frank.
Go Frank.
Go Frank.
It must have been awesome to see, is all I can say.
No joke.
Standing out there with a bullhorn for several days, and finally they just had their fill of it, and they arrested him.
Wow.
Yep. I met Frank back in, I don't know, the late mid-90s. I could say about 94, 95. He was a character. What a character.
Yeah, he definitely was. That's great. Appreciate that story.
Yeah, appreciate you guys, too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks. Yeah, goes to show that the brothel of violence and lies can't handle the truth.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember. I think Frank actually gave me a copy of a newspaper back then. Or I looked it up. I have a clipping. It's like the paper's yellow now. It's of him. Yeah, good old Frank. Well, God bless you, Frank. We will miss you, all of us, for sure. Yeah, we'll see who stands in the shoes. Who gonna fill their shoes? That's a country song, and we're only playing Christmas songs right now, so we won't do it. Anyways, that brings us up to the end of the show, guys. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks.
And thanks for all of you who called in to share about Frank. Again, you can check out our deal there at on YouTube and find the GoFundMe account for Frank Turney. And maybe we'll see you all there. When we find out, we will
Everybody to the health show that
announce it here live.
Talk Radio.
See you next week.
By the Alaska Center for Natural Medicine, only on KFAR 660 AM.